Hi, everybody. Nice seeing you again. We've been talking about coaching leadership styles. We haven't left the farm. We're still here. And so now we're going to move on and we're going to talk about B. The first one was A, autocratic leadership. The second one's going to be B, and it's dictator or dictatorial leadership. We're still talking about coaches' personality and leadership styles. And now we're going to focus in on dictatorial leadership. They are also task oriented. And I'll get to the task and the orientation and the explanation of that in a little bit. So we look at a dictator. A dictator is not an autocratic leader. There's some real differences, and yet there's a lot of similarities. They too are focused on the group objectives. They do focus on the mission and the task, but they do it a little bit differently. They see the mission not so much in a pinpoint, but they more see it as a global guiding light. If I was to try to describe it, autocratic leadership is a great example of a pinpoint light on what needs to happen. If I was to describe dictatorial leadership, it's a focused lens, which is a little bigger. Okay? And so when they're focused on group activities, there's some things they think about that maybe autocratic leaders don't think about so much. They tend to coordinate people and activities. And when they do that, they're still focused on the task, but they do it with more input. They seek people that are working with them, and then they might consult with them and ask them, "What do you think about this?" Or "How would you do this?" Or "Do you have any suggestions here?" Sometimes you would even see a dictatorial coach go so far as to say, "How do you feel about the process?" And of course, there is no such thing as block answers. You can have a dictator that's very much a dictator, almost purely autocratic. And then you can come all the way down here to a dictator that is benevolent. As a matter of fact, one of the terms that was used by one of the coaches I played for was he's a benevolent dictator. He allows you to talk and have influence, and he's pretty laid back about things. But if you cross him or you do something he doesn't like, he's going to clear that out. A benevolent dictator. So they tend to coordinate people and activities. They tend to seek others during the planning process. They want to know what you think. They want to hear what you have to say. But something you have to remember about a dictatorial leader, they will always make the final decision. They will not turn and say, "Well, what do you think we should do?" and then go with that. If they do, it's because they've chosen that as well. And so when we look at them, it's not uncommon when you're working with a dictatorial leader to see them direct a lot of traffic, but it's not uncommon with them to ask some or all of the individuals if they have an input, if they have a perspective, if they have an opinion, if they have a view. Those kinds of behaviors are easy to see the differences between them and a true, pure autocratic leader. Oftentimes, dictators will say they seek to gather information. If you're ever working with a dictatorial leader and you bring a problem to them or you bring a situation to them, do not be surprised if the first thing they say is, wait. Start at the beginning. How did this happen? Tell me what happened before it happened. In other words, give me some background information before the incident happened. That is a normal, and when you hear that from a coach, they're more of a dictator. Well, Bobby and John got in a fight out in left field. Okay, wait. Okay, they got in a fight. Back it up. What happened earlier today? Did something happen in the locker room? Had they been exchanging words the last couple of days? Blah, blah, blah. They will tend to seek to get a bigger picture. So if you see that, that's not a true autocratic leader very often. All right? And again, remember, we're not talking about black and white. We're talking about shades within each block, within each framework, okay? So when we look at a phrase and we say, well, what's the phrase that would allow us to think about dictatorial leadership? It's simple. Players and coaches have an opportunity for input, but the head coach makes the final decision. Not uncommon. A great story to follow this up is they say that on D-Day, the morning before D-Day, the night before D-Day, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who's the head of all the Allied forces, was listening to the weather, and he went around the room. There was 16 leaders from all, Britain and France and all the allies together, Australia and Canada. He asked each and every one of them, "Do you think we should go? Do you think we should go? Do you think we should go?" And it was interesting. Almost to a man, they either said no or wait. And he was standing at the window, and after he got all done listening to him, he thought about it and he turned and he looked at him and he said, okay, then we'll go. The biggest decision in the history of the world. It was the biggest offensive maneuver in wartime ever in the history of the world. He listened to everybody, but he chose to go ahead and go against everybody's suggestion. And of course, it was that very decision, because the weather was so bad, that made it such a shock, because the Germans who were defending in France didn't think that he would ever come when the weather was that bad. But he chose to go, and he caught them by surprise, because over half their troops had been allowed to leave that border edge and go back home for a weekend off. Dictatorial leader. Listen, but he made his own choice. Okay? So there's an example of a dictator. We'll be back in just a little bit with another one.